Hello and welcome to SC21 TV, the video component of SC21, the International Conference for High Performance Computing, Networking, Storage, and Analysis. In this edition, we're going to be talking about the humanities and high performance computing. And we have some esteemed guests with us from the UK. Would each of you please introduce yourselves? Let's start with Vincent.
I'm Vincent Hughes. I'm a lecturer in forensic speech science in the Department of Linguistics at the University of York.
Thank you, Vincent. Mariann.
Hello, I'm Mariann Hardey. I'm an academic that's based at the Business School at Durham University, and I'm also part of the Advanced Research Computing Group at Durham as well.
Welcome. Giles.
Hi, I'm also at Durham University. I'm in the history department and study the history of science in the Middle Ages.
Wonderful, thank you. And Clare.
Hi, I'm Clare Warick. I'm a professor of digital humanities at Durham and I'm based in the English department. And I'm particularly interested in the relationship between how we use digital environments and physical environments.
I can't wait to hear more about that. Let's start with Vincent. Tell us, give us an overview. What are digital humanities and what role does HPC play? How are those two connected?
So digital humanities is I think quite a broad term. It describes the interaction or intersection between traditional humanities areas, I guess languages, literature, history, philosophy, those sorts of things, with computer science and maths, engineering and technology. And really, at least for me, that means the application of computational methods and coding, statistics in order to answer research questions that we might have about society and culture. So personally, for me, that's about understanding language, understanding how people speak and what makes individual voices individual or unique to individual speakers.
Well, thank you. That's a great overview. Let's bring in Mariann. What would you add to that, and what can you tell us about the ARC that you're involved in, ARC?
That's correct, yeah. I mean, just to add to Vincent's great starter in terms of how we define digital humanities, I guess the most exciting thing is actually this is a discipline that by its natural default is interdisciplinary, and it's really difficult within academia to get support for interdisciplinary work. And part of my role within ARC, so Advanced Research Computing at Durham, is around widening participation and new routes of research endeavour through different faculties, different departments, bringing those groups together. And I'm sure Clare can speak to that too in just a moment. The other context for digital humanities is about not only the academic research that we can kind of build in terms of new corpus of knowledge and new routes to be able to share that, whether it's platform based or something else. But also the very ecology of the research itself. So at Durham, we have recruited a team of research software engineers, RSEs, and it's almost a new mindset, a new environment for researchers to find themselves in terms of the support that they can access through RSEs to enable them to do HPC-based projects.
Great, thank you. You mentioned Clare, so we'll bring her in. This is kind of like those television debates, right? If someone mentions your name, then we go to you next.
Yeah, I think this is a very new area in many ways, and it can be something that we were talking about scale. This idea that often in the humanities, researchers are used to working on, individual text or individual pictures or relatively, what in computational terms might be relatively small collections of things, of artifacts. And traditionally, that was because you only have one brain, and the amount that you can read or see or listen to or whatever in your lifetime is relatively limited. What HPC gives you is this sense of scale, is this idea that instead of thinking about working on maybe one author, you could work on a whole library. Instead of thinking about looking at certain museum artifacts and collections, Mariann and I are collaborating at the moment on some work that will be seeking to look at the entirety of the Japanese collections, not just in our fantastic Oriental Museum at Durham University, but also in collaboration with Rutgers University, which is, of course, thousands of miles away. You know, in physical terms, it would be literally impossible for the same researcher to work simultaneously on both collections and to interrogate them intelligently. But HPC and AI techniques do give us the opportunity to do that in a way that, you know, literally is not possible in physical spaces. This is not the kind of thing that humanities scholars have traditionally engaged with in the past. So I think, you know, Mariann was talking about her sense of facilitating the participation of potentially new researchers and new groups in computing. Part of that is to do with that sense of how do we comprehend working at a different pace and a different scale in the humanities.
Well, let's ask Giles about that.
Well, certainly from the interdisciplinary angle, I never thought, I'm a medieval historian, I never thought I'd be anywhere near high performance computing. But it's a project that we set up to investigate a 13th century thinker who had a range of treatises on natural phenomena, cosmological as well as what he would call meteorological. And one of these is an extraordinary treatise where he, this is written in 1225, he has the universe beginning from a single point of light, which expands to the shape of a sphere, which looks a bit like the Big Bang. We do this project with modern scientists because we found that incredibly helpful for interrogating the the medieval texts. They're about similar phenomena to those that modern experts look at. And in the case of this treatise on the physical fabric of the universe, this thinker, Robert Grosseteste, who went on to become Bishop of Lincoln, is operating within the medieval universe. So it's the celestial spheres and the lunar sphere, but he gives indications of how you might calculate that and how he's thinking how these spheres came into being. We had one of our colleagues from the Institute of Computational Cosmology, Professor Richard Bauer, as part of the team come along and look at this alternative cosmology. Richard came along, I think, thinking that this medieval stuff would be complete gibberish, and then got completely hooked on trying to model this version of the universe that was completely different to what he does in his day job, which is working at the Dirac supercomputing cluster at Durham at the ICC. And it took Richard 2 or 3 months, but he eventually came up with a program. He's using all of the techniques of smooth particle hydrodynamics, for example, to build the universe that this medieval thinker suggested.
This is really just an amazing, the breadth of this is fascinating to me. And I think I may have an analogy here. I'm thinking of the history of photography. And at first, of course, we just had black and white still images. And then, because people were interested in emulating something that was more realistic, we started putting images together, right? And realizing that with persistence of vision, we could have motion pictures. And then, of course, we layered on color photography and sound and stereophonic sound, et cetera. Do you think this is a fair analogy, that we've gone from maybe just having a single black and white image to this whole additional way of, with film, we can capture motion and sound. How does that fly with you guys? Oh, let's bring in Clare. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting analogy. I mean, one of the things is this, it brings to my mind these questions of kind of zooming in and zooming out, if you like, in the sense that to make sense of huge corpora of data in terms of the humanities, you know, large numbers of scanned images or large numbers of text, you actually also have to have the detailed knowledge in small spaces as well, if you see what I mean. You know, that Giles almost certainly can only do such a great job on the research at large scale because he knows the history of that period, the texts that Grosseteste is writing himself in such detail. And in the same way, in literary studies has always been about finding patterns within texts. It was often about, you know, finding patterns within a single text. But in a sense, the activity is similar. But if you're running data analytics, let's say on a very large corpus of texts, and you start to see some patterns developing, you only know why those patterns might be interesting if you also know quite a lot about those texts from having read them.
I've seen each of you nodding as Claire talked there. And as we near the end of this interview, I'd kind of like to do a lightning round. And if you would care to, also mention why something such as SC21, this international conference, is important for these kinds of things to have a forum. So let me bring in Vincent.
I think what I'd say is just to reiterate really what Claire has just said, which is about this idea of zooming in and out, and that's, I think, quite stark for what I do, because there are kind of two branches to what I do, and there's linguists on one side and there's engineers on the other. And actually what digital humanities allows us to do is actually kind of, if I'm not mixing my metaphors, speak both languages. It allows us to sit in the middle and actually offer insights at both the kind of macro level that the kind of HPC allows us to do with the scale and everything, but also it allows us to provide very specific domain-specific kind of fine-grained linguistic analysis. And it just, to come back to your analogy of the pictures, what it does is, to my mind, it's more about kind of pixels, if you like. It just gives us a better picture of what's actually going on. It allows us to see the picture better rather than this idea of kind of getting better in any sense. It just gives us a more fine-grained picture of what's going on at both, you know, zooming out and zooming in. And I think more of that in all fields, the better.
Mariann, I see you nodding.
Yes, I'm going to match my comment with your question around the opportunities from SC21 as well, and that is as Vincent picked up on in terms of how we get to talk about stuff.
Hey, is that cat sitting on top of your microphone? Because you're a little bit muffled right now.
Oh, okay. How's this? Is that
That's better.
Okay.
Was it? It was the cat, maybe.
I think it was the cat.
Oh, okay.
So yes, to debunk the myth around high performance computing as only being for certain scholars, to encourage the opportunities of interdisciplinarity and to not be intimidated by kind of the scale of the research in terms of how big something may need to get, because there is that unique focus in terms of, you know, what you might offer as, you know, an impact or a research objective or something that comes out of that. And particularly for the opportunities coming out of SC21, it's a sharing of that computational knowledge and the opportunity to share, you know, the different languages that we have, even around computing and around research ideas. And that's been a common theme throughout whenever we get scholars of different disciplines together to even start to ideate around a particular project. So don't be intimidated by that. Do take stock in kind of the opportunities that are available to discuss, you know, not only the outcomes that might be brilliant and exciting and the possibilities there, but also, you know, some of the challenges and barriers that we all encounter, whether it's your cat across your microphone or whatever that might be.
Ah, great. Thanks for integrating that. Giles, you're smiling. I think we're all smiling. We're glad to have the cat involved. What's your final thought for us, Giles?
I think any opportunity to broaden your collaborative horizons is an important one. And as Mariann was saying, you know, not being intimidated by these sorts of collaborations. As I said, I never thought I would do that with Richard, but we did. And I think it also puts, for me, this creative tension as well between the tangible and the intangible by using these techniques. Richard made a medieval universe, which was in a 13th century person's head, come to life again. So in a sense, you're virtually touching the past, and that's a wonderful thing to be able to do.
I believe you did this in the interview, but could you identify that person again? And we'll put that up in the notes as well.
Sure. This is Robert Grosseteste, who was Bishop of Lincoln about 1170. He was born, dies in 1253. Wonderful.
And Clare, you'll be our anchor person, a wrap up here. How would you help summarize the breadth of the possibilities that are now available to us in HPC and the humanities?
Yeah, I think if we've had a very short time to share ideas here, but one of the great things is in talking to different scholars, in talking about different methodologies, you can immediately see that even in this short conversation, we're beginning to share ideas. We're beginning to try and think differently about ideas and problems that we may have approached in one particular way. And I think that's one of the huge opportunities of working with computational researchers and HPC, that it allows us to come together with other researchers to bring some of the ideas that we may have been working on for years and perhaps we're slightly bored of, or we've run into a brick wall and we need to think about new ways to attack those problems. And in the discussion with computational researchers, new and really quite unexpected directions may emerge, new questions may come up. We won't necessarily answer them, but it gives us an idea of new ways that we might go about our research. And I always find that process really inspiring and extremely exciting. So I would really hope that we can kind of spark some interest in people who may be attending the conference to think about how they might want to work with humanities researchers and humanities researchers with computational researchers to create new ideas that almost certainly would not have happened by the individuals working alone. Really
Mariann, should I have been calling you Maz?
No, Mariann's fine. Either's fine.
Okay, and what's your cat's name?
Penelope, or annoying cat, depending on.
I love that name. That's fabulous. All righty. Well, thank you each. There's Penelope.
Great.
Well, thank you, each of you, for what you've contributed to this discussion today. And thank you, our viewers, for watching this edition of SC21 TV.